I'm a trucker on a highway that doesn't exist. The farther you drive, the odder it gets. It's best to limit interactions with human inhabitants of the road. While not generally dangerous, gas station employees often rotate out. Waitresses will find it difficult to remember you, no matter how often you meet. Friendly shopkeepers may swap personalities from day to day. Unless provoked, inhabitants are rarely aggressive, but neither are they reliable confidants. Previous employees who have invested emotional energy into relationships often discover their energy wasted and their relationships one-sided. We recommend keeping road inhabitants at a professional distance. And as previously stated, take care not to provoke them. Autumn came to wish me goodbye before I left, by which I mean she came to lecture me one final time. Don't die, she said. I'm not going to die. I'm not finished. Don't die. Then you won't be able to give me your truck on the return. Yeah, that's not happening either. Autumn, I can't even come back to this town without you in the car. I'm not finished. And not true. Now that you've been once, you can always come back. It's been added to your version of Route 333, which also unfortunately means your drive will be a bit longer. That's fine. Wasn't apologizing. This is all your fault, and you owe me. She grew suddenly serious. You told me you're going past the 3-day mark, which sounds like it might already be farther than normal given how quickly you drive. Just be careful. Things can get odd. More than normal. Try to stay in your truck as much as you can, and don't die. It almost sounds like you don't hate me nearly as much as you profess to. You're the only one that knows where I am now. Why can't you hijack one of the cars in town? She shuddered. Tried that once. Will not be repeating. I opened my mouth, closed it, then asked the question she'd refused to answer yesterday. How long have you been lane locked? She glared at me. A lot of us give up when we get trapped, especially the older ones. I'm young though. It doesn't matter how long I've been here or how long it takes to escape. I'm not dying here. A long time then. Neither of us acknowledged the obvious truth. Autumn was further out than any other trucker. Much further. Tiff was mere hours from the end of Route 333, but it would still be a decade or more for her to escape. Autumn, though, this far away. She may be young now, but she wouldn't exit until her 50s or 60s, if at all. It was all so unfair. We were both here, in the same spot, but she was trapped, while I could be in the real world in less than a day. That spark, though. Her stubborn determination, I was struck again with how much she looked like Myra. Here was somebody who'd been driving alone for multiple years, and she still managed to hold her chin up. Oh, and Brendan, she said. This isn't in the employee handbook, but hold your breath if you go through any tunnels. With that, she patted the side of my rig and marched away. 3 days. 3 more days until my final destination. With everything that had happened the last 40-some-odd hours, it felt like weeks had gone by, but I was barely 2 days into my trip, less than that. With the forest dwellers, the meat storm, and autumn, I was hours off schedule. I'd be putting in a positively illegal number of hours to make it up. It wasn't that I thought some specific terrible thing would happen if I was late. It was just that the more time I spent with this particular cargo, the more chances some unknown terrible thing had to occur. I took Autumn's advice and stayed mostly in my truck. When I needed fuel, I stopped only at empty gas stations. I'd triple-check the area was deserted before hopping out, and when it was time to sleep, I would stuff paper tissues into my nostrils for the smell. Who cared about the weather? There was no way I was leaving the windows open. Sure enough, the first night without Autumn, the faceless man was sniffing at my window. I blared my horn until he scampered away. The next day, I chanced a food run to a rundown general store along the main road. Within minutes, the employees went from friendly to frowning. Soon, they were collecting near the front doors with brooms, looking less and less human by the second. I slipped out the delivery door with my food basket without paying. Gas station employees started staring at me just a bit too long. At night, the highway would fill with thick, blinding mist. Heavy clouds seemed to sit always on the horizon, as if waiting for any excuse to descend, and the air, how to describe it? There was an oppressiveness. The fuzzy, weighted feeling just before a storm, but constant. You'll be fine, I reassured myself. As long as you stay in your truck, you're safe. The wailing was louder now. The childlike thing in the trailer would openly weep as I drove. Only when I pulled off and walked to the back would it stop, as if the thing was embarrassed to be caught. It was the afternoon of day 4, when I officially passed the furthest point I'd ever gone. an abandoned shopping mall. There'd never been much logic behind where dispatch sent us to drop off our trailers. Sometimes it was at empty warehouses, sometimes vacant grocery stores. The only requirement was that these drop-off points all had some sort of a loading dock, but apart from that, they were random. Abandoned usually. I didn't know of any trucker who'd ever picked a trailer up. I slowed as I approached the pullout for the mall. Past this point was uncharted territory, a vast expanse of unknown. From what I'd gathered from Daidri and Vikram and the other drivers, almost none of them had been past this point either. I stepped on the gas. The eternal desert gave way to canyon. A fragile guardrail rose up to protect my multi-ton vehicle from sheer cliffs, and the straight road began twisting. Far below, a blackish river wound its way through meadows and thickets of birch trees. The road was empty. It had always been empty. Without Autumn, I was again the only vehicle on the road. Not that it stopped me from clenching my stomach around curves, but it was more than that. There were no birds. The very wind had given way to flat, dead air. When I stopped for a bathroom break on the side of the road, the stillness was maddening. "You all good?" I asked the trailer on one of these breaks. I headed back to the cab without waiting. I'd given up hoping that the thing would. A mutter. I scrambled back over and pressed my ear to the trailer. Watching. I stayed still. The thing had spoken. I'd suspected it could understand me before, but I hadn't been sure. Honestly, maybe it still couldn't, in the way parrots don't understand the human words they say, but this somehow felt intentional. "You're watching me?" I asked. Nothing. I waited some more. There were no more words, no more sobbing, not even audible breathing. Eventually, I started back on my way. What did it mean? What was it watching? Me? Or was it merely annoyed by my constant checkups? It wanted me to stop watching it. Could that be it? Then another thought, a cold one. What if I was misunderstanding entirely? I shuddered. A desire overwhelmed me to look up through the windshield, above me, at the infinite, patient sky. I didn't. Instead, I did what any 20-something-year-old would do while their understanding of cosmic existence was being deconstructed and made anew. I switched on the radio. At least there would always be K-pop. The longer I drove, the more I noticed odd details. The leaves on trees looked almost correct, but if you slowed and focused, they weren't always connected to the branch. They would dangle there, suspended by nothing. On stretches of desert, tumbleweeds would roll across the road. There was still no wind. They would bounce in multiple directions at the same time, as if they weren't quite sure which way they were supposed to go, only that they should go somewhere. And the canyon river. If you squinted, it looked like a river, but when you examined it, there was no movement of water. It just sat there, entirely flat, despite the downward slope of the terrain. Sometimes, I would wind around a circular hill, far past the point I should have met up with road I'd already come down, except I never would. It just kept going in a loop. New scenery, new views, around the same limited circle, until finally the road would realize, I've gone too long, haven't I? It would straighten out onto a brand new stretch of highway. The best comparison would be AI art. The first time you glance over it, nothing seems amiss. It's only when you study it that you notice six-fingered hands and strings of letters that aren't quite words. It's the impression of an image, more than anything. Like a waking dream. The further I drove from the real world, the less real things seemed to be. Route 333 had the general idea of how physics worked, but kept forgetting the specifics. Or perhaps it merely didn't care. Why should it? Humans were never meant to be here, or especially get this far. What if I lane locked right now? The thought bubbled up from nowhere. I shoved it down. Well, tried to. I cranked up the music and sang along. I again tried to. I didn't actually know the words. What if I do, though? Autumn still had a chance. Her trip would take decades, but here, nearly 4 days away from the start of the road, the drive back would be hundreds of years. I'd be stuck here in this strange, not reality. I turned the music up louder. Why didn't I recognize this song? After 4 days of Station 96.2, I'd memorized most of the songs by now, but this one, it wasn't even K-pop. I want to switch it off. My hand didn't move. What the? Again I tried, but my grip on the steering wheel only tightened. I glanced down at the car radio and, oh no. The digital display no longer showed Station 96.2. Somehow, a slip of my hand or a bump in the road, the station had switched to 96.5, one of the forbidden stations. I let out a stream of profanity. At least my mouth still functioned correctly. I tried shifting my foot to the brake. It only pushed down on the gas harder. There was a volume dial on the steering wheel. If I could only raise my thumb and press down. Impossible, though. My limbs had ceased to function. My legs and hands, anything besides my face really, were no longer my own. Far in the distance, a curve in the road. The needle on my speedometer continued to rise. If I couldn't stop, I'd hurl over the edge, off the cliff, into the canyon. Already, the crunch of metal rang in my ears. A snap. Blackness. The guardrail ahead was already broken and missing. The road wanted nothing between me and the inevitable fall. The song on the radio would end. That was how I escaped. It would end any second, and in the pause, I would punch the power button and seize control. It seemed so obvious. I'd always gotten lucky with these things. The creatures always stopped a second before they found me. I always woke up and saw the faceless man just before he could unlock my door. Another driver appeared as sacrifice right when the meat storm was preparing to crush me. I would get lucky now too. Any moment, the song would end. I waited. It didn't. I expected numb resignation like had happened a few days previous. I'd given up so easily then, but what filled me now was scalding and sharp. None of this was fair. Why couldn't I both want to live and be allowed to? Before, whenever I'd wished to stop existing, something had always pulled me back, but now, when I was finally finding reasons to continue on, something was going to kill me anyways. Tiff needed me. Autumn did too, and Al, and the thing in the trailer had already been through so much this trip. It's ironic, I thought as the edge approached, how the things we would die for are the same things that make us afraid of dying. The injustice of it all bubbled up into my throat. It exploded out my mouth. I was screaming without intentionally choosing to. My throat burned, but I roared anyway at the radio, the road, the universe, anything and all of it, everything and nothing. I screamed until it consumed me. It drowned out the world, overtook my vision, eliminated all sound. I slammed off the radio. The brakes screeched. The back of the truck whipped back and forth. The entire rig came to a stop a few meters short of the edge. For a good 5 minutes, I gripped the wheel with my foot planted firmly on the brake, doing nothing but try to control my breathing in shocked silence. It was only when I got out and peered over the edge that I realized why the guardrail in that particular section had already been torn away. A twisted freight container lay on its side hundreds of feet below. The cab lay a ways off, upside down and equally bent. Later, I used a spare ice scraper to gouge the stereo into pieces. Fun while it lasted. I drove the final day in silence. No cops pulled me over. No gas station attendants approached me with 2 wide smiles. Even the dark clouds on the horizon dissipated. It was like Route 333 had fired every last bullet at me, and now it could merely scowl from a distance, holding its empty pistol. I let my eyes glaze over the abnormalities of ever-degrading reality and drove. Weeks ago, so much silence might have unpicked the threads of my sanity. It was why I always made sure to have music downloaded. Thoughts were always worse when there was nothing loud to chase them out. Now though, with the sobbing thing in the trailer and Autumn trapped in a town only I could access, my mind was singular. I would get my cargo to its destination. I would keep it safe. When I did actually reach the drop-off point, I didn't feel relief, only a determination to finish the job. I'd driven up a mountain for hours, watching for the abandoned gas station Randall had described to me. Right when I expected to crest the summit, the road leveled out. The landscape in front of me stretched out to open, lush forest impossible. We should be at a peak. I should be gazing at miles of valley below. Laws of nature were barely a consideration anymore. All I cared about was the abandoned gas station at the side of the road. Randall's instructions were clear. I might loathe him, but even Autumn seemed to think I should follow his directions. I would leave the trailer at the loading bay, just like always, turn around, and drive home. It took me some minutes to unhook the trailer, but eventually it detached. I set my hand on the back doors one final time. We made it. You'll be safe here. Things will stop trying to capture you now. A child's voice sobbed in response. The thing usually stopped when I approached, but it cried openly now, as if it understood this was our final goodbye. How could I just leave it? Would something come to collect it? Who was responsible to keep it safe now? I fingered the lock. I didn't even have to look. I could simply unlock it, so it had a way to get out once I was gone. If it had begged me, I never would have considered this, but it hadn't. Not once. It wasn't like hitchhikers begging for a ride. The thing had resigned itself to its situation like Tiff. Like I had in the past. Be safe, I whispered. Before I could change my mind, I drove away. No more breaking rules. No more risks. And no looking back, I told myself. My own rule. It would only make things harder. I neared the curve that would carry me back to the mountain switchbacks. The ground shook. Around me, trees quavered. In my rear view, the abandoned gas station tilted. The earth around it opened up like the yawning maw of a beast, and my trailer teetered on the edge. No, there was no time to turn the rig back around. I leapt out and sprinted the way I'd come. I reached the opening chasm, just as the freight container wavered, then pitched forward into the darkness. Screaming, a child's screeches rose from the container as it tumbled downwards. The earth snapped closed with the sickening crunch of metal. Silence. You've all just spent the last few weeks reading about the first half of my 10-day trip. You're probably all geared up for my adventures on the return. You're excited for the details of more deadly situations in which I narrowly escape. There was none of that. I drove in silence. I spoke to no one. I didn't stop to shower, and I ate only what I could grab from gas stations. When I passed through Autumn's town, I kept driving. When I drove past Tiff's diner, I didn't stop. I took the occasional nap and drove through the nights. Nothing and no one attempted to stop me, not even the forest dwellers. For the first time, there was no supernatural stalling in the redwood section. They knew, like everything else, something terrible would befall them should they try to slow me down. When I finally pulled into the truck yard near nightfall, my resolve didn't falter. I parked, downed an energy drink, then strode through the dispatch center into Randall's office. His eyes bugged out from his skull. Brendan? You're okay. Calmly, I locked the door behind me. What? How? Nobody's spoken to you in over a week. We thought you'd. I slammed my foot into his chest. He and his chair crashed to the floor. I fell on him, pinned him down, and wrapped my hand around his mouth, pressing down with pounds of force. Wide, fearful eyes stared up. For once they weren't mine. You're right, I said. We haven't spoken in so long. Let's have a chat, shall we?